talking about the premise, the main idea of what it is that I'm getting at, okay? So this is approaching an enhanced multi-sensory experience, embracing the concepts of synesthesia and tetrachromacy in pedagogical ways at the piano.
오늘 렉처 슬라이드 제목이 굉장히 긴데 그 중에 이제 선생님이 두 가지 크게 컨셉으로 갖고 계신 시네스티시아의 공감각이라는 거고 그리고 테트라크로메시라는 색각, 색깔이라는 뜻인데 저도 조금 이따 더 설명을 할게요. 그거에 대해서 오늘 이제 말씀을 나누신다고 합니다.
And if I have a microphone here that I was planning to use while I play, I'm talking over my playing. If anybody feels I should use it now, just let me know if they want to hear more clearly. Okay, so 2 words to define, synesthesia and tetrachromacy. So the idea of synesthesia is a mingling of or coupling of 2 senses or more than 2 senses.
첫 번째 그 중요한 단어 시네스티시아, 한국어 공감각이라고 국어 시간에 많이 들어봤죠. 5가지 감각이 우리 갖고 있는 것 중에 여러 가지 감각을 한 번에 느끼는 그런 컨셉이고요.
Some of the most famous examples are composers such as Scriabin and Messiaen, who claim to see colors when they heard specific pitches.
스크리아빈이나 메시안처럼 어떤 특정한 소리를 들었을 때 특정한 색깔을 느낀다고 그런 컨셉으로 많이 유명하기도 해요.
And you can find now thousands, maybe millions of videos on YouTube where people put light shows that correspond to what they hear in the music. I'm actually not that interested in that idea, although I think that is very much still connected to this concept. What I'm more interested in is some of the other kinds of senses. So of course, visual, hearing music and seeing certain kinds of movement. So it's more direction than it is really about blue or green or red, that sort of thing. At the same time, synesthesia also combines with other senses too, the sense of touch. So hearing sounds and feeling a certain kind of texture, smoothness, or there's grains that you feel. Is there some kind of resistance to kind of moving through the music? Or is it just like brushing ice?
아까 말씀하신 것처럼 우리가 소리를 색깔과 연관시킬 수도 있지만 또 방금 말씀하신 것처럼 터치, 우리 촉각에도 연관을 시킬 수 있다고.
Now, ice with wet fingers is different than if your fingers are a little bit too dry. So we can kind of talk about various types of textures that are connected to sonorities that we try to produce all the time at the piano. But one of the goals of this is to unlock more of our potential at the piano. Our potential is what we listen for and what we try to experience. And of course, we have limited tools at the piano. We can only do so much. But color is very much contextual, right? If something sounds brighter, it's because what came before it was darker.
컬러는 사실 앞뒤 어떤 문맥이 있고 컨텍스추얼하다는 게 앞뒤 뭔가 전후 맥락이 있는 상태에서 우리가 느끼고 이해하고 그렇게 생각합니다.
There is this very famous picture from about 8 years ago, and it went viral. And I'm going to show you the picture, and I'm going to give everybody in the audience 2 options. So you either see blue and black, or you see white and gold. So put up your hands if you see white and gold. Put up your hands if you see blue and black. So if you look around, you can't understand the other side, right? I see white and gold, and I cannot see blue and black. That's great. You have a different perception than most of the rest of us. Look at it. You can only see what you see, but the other half of the room sees different colors. So there's a scientific explanation. I'm not going to get into this, but this went viral in 2015. So you can look up this dress. Blue, black, white, gold. And this just gives us an idea of like even colors, it's so completely different.
그냥 우리 색깔만 봐도 지금 사람마다 다르게 느끼는 것처럼 정말 너무 다양하고 깊은 그런 다양함이 공존하고 있어요.
So when Scriabin, there's attributed to a certain chord sounds blue, orange. To me, that's kind of meaningless. It's so personal to him.
뭐 스크리아빈이 어떤 이 소리가 무슨 색이다, 주황색이다 이렇게 말했던 게 조금은 선생님한테 너무 too personal한 것 같다고.
But the sense of light and darkness is really kind of what I'm getting at the most. Now, the other word that we talked about, tetrachromacy. Okay.
한국어로 저도 사전 찾아보니까 사색형 색감이라고 나오는데 테트라가 숫자 4, 네 가지 색이 있는 크로마시 할 때 색깔에 관한 그런 단어예요.
So, I lived about I'm 45 years old now. Half of my life, I lived very carefree, not realizing that I was seeing less colors than everybody else. But I realized when I was about 23, I took a colorblind test, and I'm partially colorblind. So I see maybe 50, 60% of what most people here see.
선생님 좀 나이가 들어서 그 컬러 블라인드 생명 테스트를 해서 그때 아셨대요. 조금 있다는 게.
In no way do I feel like I'm missing something. I don't know what those other colors are like. I don't know those other kind of shades. So I'm happily just seeing the world from my point of view.
선생님 그냥 선생님 보이는 대로 계속 살고 있는 거죠.
But of course, I'm very curious. I wish I could see more. What would it be like if I saw more shades than what I currently can see?
지금보다 더 많은 명암을 볼 수 있다면 어떨까 궁금하시기도 하대요.
Now, if all of you can imagine being in my shoes and being able to see much more color than you can see, there's a condition called tetrachromacy where people have a fourth cone and they can see 100 times more shades than what the normal human being can see.
그래서 아까 말씀드린 그 테트라크로미시를 갖고 있는 사람들은 우리가 보통 일반 사람들이 보는 것보다 더 많은 색깔을 구별하고 그거를 인지할 수 있는 능력을 갖고 있어요.
I first saw an interview through the New Yorker magazine about somebody who was talking about how when she looked at people, she could see how sick they were based upon the shades of the skin color.
어떤 인터뷰에서 어떤 여성은 사람들의 이제 피부 컬러를 보고 저 사람이 아픈지 알 수 있다고 그게 색깔로 느껴진다고 말을 했대요.
And you can imagine how much subtlety there could be in somebody that sees so much. They could look at the wall here and see the different kinds of how certain paint strokes are older than other paint strokes. Where I look at that and it's just the same color. There's shadows, but I don't see different colors. Somebody else might see many more perspectives within just white.
그냥 단순히 이렇게 우리가 벽 보기만 해도 그냥 하얀 벽이라고 생각할 수 있는데 어떤 사람들은 이 하얀 벽 속에서도 더 다른 하얀색을 발견을 할 수 있다고 해요.
So in a sense, it's almost like if you wear sunglasses all day and you lift those sunglasses, how much more all the colors pop out at you. So what I'm interested in this presentation is taking this idea and applying it to sound and listening.
그래서 오늘 이 엑셀에서 선생님은 이런 컨셉을 이제 우리가 들으면서 그 피아노의 소리를 통해서 나오는 그런 것들에 대해서 한번 접목을 시켜보고 싶습니다.
So the equivalent to somebody who has this tetrachromacy, the audio equivalent is actually a very terrible thing.
그 누군가 더 많은 색깔을 볼 수 있는 사람처럼 그게 이제 소리로 되면은 사실 그게 굉장히 좀 안 좋은 거일 수도 있고 힘든 거일 수도 있어요.
Because they're far too sensitive to dynamic spikes. They can't stand loud, and they can hear maybe higher frequencies like dogs can hear, But it really doesn't enhance one's life to have so-called super hearing because it's too much. But how about the idea of like color blindness and seeing more color? Can we hear more color? Can we hear more nuance by training the ear more to kind of force ourselves to listen more and more and more and to listen in more three-dimensional way? It's not about just like listening harder. It's listening more kind of holistically and really hearing sound waves and vibrations and that sort of thing.
우리가 그냥 단순히 그냥 열심히 듣고 그런 것뿐만 아니라 그 3D로 정말 그 여러 디멘션들을 느낄 수 있게 들을 수 있는지.
I will start demonstrating soon, but if we go back to the term synesthesia, it's as I said, it's a coupling or mingling of senses. And some people, when they hear music, they smell things, or they even taste. When they see numbers, they see colors. They think of time. They think of months. There's a sense of time and space around them. So there's the idea of numbers and the words having a three-dimensional quality to them.
다들 뭐 그런 경험 해본 적 있죠? 뭘 들으면서 뭐 소리를 들으면서 뭐 냄새가 느껴지기도 하고 맛이 느껴지기도 하고 여러 감각들이 섞인 거, 보는 감각적인 그거에 대해 계속 말씀해 주시고 있어요.
So we'll start a little bit I'll play a little bit, I'll demonstrate some things, and I hope to talk over my playing. So please, somebody let me know if they can't really hear my voice, or if this is too loud, or whatnot. So as I was saying, color is very much based upon context. When we hear some kind of sound, we might all attach color to it. That doesn't matter what you think. That's so personal. But hearing something lighten up or darken, through the music that we play, through voicing, through the kinds of touch, that's been my kind of fixation, especially with Ravel's Ondine. Now, the very opening of Ondine, this is something that we spend countless amounts of time as pianists working at to control, to get it very precise. And I did a little bit of an experiment. I played this to a non-musician, and I asked, what's the difference between this versus... And no, I don't hear any difference. And I said, really? I spent so much time working this, and somebody can't tell if I do this versus... Nope. And I said, what if I tried to inflect it versus? And with a lot of prompting, I heard more of what I thought I wanted to hear. But in the end, a lot of those nuances were just lost. And you could even say the same thing about how many people out there can hear the difference between a half step and a whole step. We assume that everybody in this room, because we spend our whole lives feeling those little differences. But to the vast majority of listeners, maybe that just goes right over their head. They can hear the difference, but they can't feel the difference. It doesn't have any meaning to them. It's like me being colorblind.
뭐 여기 있는 친구들 모두 다 이제 음악하니까 그런 미묘한 차이를 잘 느끼겠지만 사실 일반인들한테는 그런 텍스처든 뭐 아니면 하프스텝, 풀스텝 차이든 그런 게 사실 잘 못 느껴질 수도 있어요.
And I thought, okay, if somebody is listening and they don't have a so-called more enhanced hearing because they've spent the time studying these kinds of things and listening for it, is there something I can do as an interpreter to maybe help illuminate some of these color choices? And it's not my color choice so much as the composer's color choices. And so one of the things we can always do as pianists is to take what is written and explore alternate ways of playing it, different figurations, and we come back to what the composer wrote, and then we understand there's a very specific kind of emotion or a specific kind of texture that's being created.
뭐 작곡가가 곡을 쓰면서 특정하게 뭔가 의도를 했던 그런 바를 우리가 찾아볼 수 있을 것 같아요.
How much easier would it be for millions of hours of pianists that spent millions of hours that pianists have spent practicing if this was the opening? Or triplets. Or kind of free. Just like kind of an ominous trill. No, there's a very specific rhythm. And how prominent should that be? I think it should be somewhat understood, yet it shouldn't sound like salsa. Right? But it's embedded in there. And why would Ravel do that versus this? Or something just kind of a buzz, which is much easier to control. I think there's a certain quality when he's depicting water that it's not still water, yet it's not a flowing river. It just has this kind of rustling quality. So it needs to be a little bit unpredictable, but just slightly.
라벨이 이 물에 대한 걸 묘사를 할 때 막 아주 가만히 있는 물도 아니고 그렇다고 이렇게 몰아치는 물도 아니고 뭔가 이렇게 이 표면에서 움직이는 그런 물을 표현하기 위해서 이런 특정한 리듬형을 쓴 것 같아요.
And when one gets into kind of really feeling and hearing those rhythms, there's so many different ways of experiencing those rhythms, and that can always help with how we work on it technically too, if we find groupings. So now, if we also kind of play with the registers, this is unusual because Ravel's melody is like kind of in the middle of that accompaniment figure.
음역대도 되게 특이한데 이게 되게 중간에 왼손과 오른손이 이렇게 섞여서 이런 음역을 사용하고 있어요. 둘이 붙어서.
It's mostly lower, but occasionally it's in the middle of the chord. Sometimes it reaches above, but it makes it much more difficult to bring out. So I tried this kind of thing just to experiment. How different that feels versus, or maybe even we hear the thumb as a bass versus here. That thumb is like, it's not really a bass note, it's kind of in the middle, but occasionally it acts as a bass line. Sorry. That's kind of a bass. So it has many different kinds of functions, but playing it in different registers made it me more aware of this specific register in its own very special kind of shimmer.
지금 보여주신 것처럼 원래 있는 음역대 말고 여러 다른 음역대로 시도를 해보셨잖아요. 그렇게 하면서 여기가 정말 갖고 있는 기능이 뭐고 의미가 뭔지를 좀 파악하실 수 있었던 것 같아요.
And of course, there's only really one way to play it in terms of like you play it with your right hand. Just to experience it this way, of course, not on stage. You have more control over the top voice because maybe you don't have to use 4/5 or 3/4 or whatever your fingering is, and then it makes the rhythm clearer. Maybe that's too clear, but it's something worth practicing to compare that with the one-handed version.
한 손으로 그냥 계속 하는 것보다 여러 방법으로 이렇게 시도해보는 것도 좋은 방법이에요.
Now, I'm going to really humble myself, but to actually switch the hands is also a wonderful exercise too. All those tricky voicings I didn't work out with just, but it changes very much. It feels in some ways natural because we're used to singing with the right hand and keeping the left hand really quiet.
오른손으로 멜로디 연습을 어떻게 보면 또 내추럴하게 들리는 것도 있죠.
So I gave a talk last year where I touched upon a topic of trying things in different keys, and I'll use a little bit of that idea for this too.
작년 선생님 렉처 리사이트를 하실 때 같은 음악을 여러 다른 조에서 이조해서 하시는 거를 말씀하셨는데 오늘도 약간은 그거랑 연관이 좀 있을 것 같아요.
This compare with D major. Naturally we get more third, and in C sharp major the third, because it's like down there, it never really pops out the same way. So something about the key is already a little more subdued than if it was in D major. Same thing with that half step. So naturally there's something about it's shimmering, but it also has a muted quality to it too.
뭔가 이렇게 반짝반짝하는 것 같지만 또 동시에 살짝 이렇게 소리가 죽어있는 그런 느낌이 나요.
So try this in all sorts of keys, but it changes the melody. It's all white keys versus. So Ravel's key causes us to have to put our hands in all of these different contortions because it doesn't fit as comfortably as if it was all here. This is probably the worst feeling key. I've tried them all. And it's just like the way you have to kind of work around and underneath. But I think there is something special to that. It has its own color. Now, I started thinking about, okay, Moonlight. This, if you read the poem, it's based upon the voice of Ondine's mermaid, water nymph, and her voice floats in. It's a very almost supernatural voice, and then we see moonlight against the window panes, and it's also elevated up in a balcony. So looking down upon the lake, and there's this kind of a floating quality.
이 곡이 베이스가 된 그 시가 있는데 시 내용에 보면 온딘이라는 물의 요정이 있고 이렇게 위에서 뭔가 이렇게 그 물이 안개가 있으면 또 달빛 아래에서 그 물을 또 바라보는 그런 장면을 상상하시면 될 것 같아요.
So this is again just perception. It's just my perception. Maybe some of you agree, maybe some of you don't. But to me, this does not sound like moonlight. This doesn't either. This to me sounds kind of like sunlight. But why does this sound more like moonlight? We're all influenced if we know the piece and its context, but maybe it's something to do with that third being somewhat suppressed. It's a white key, it has a special color. It'll never have the brightness of D major. So something about this key has a muted third, which makes it's happy, it's a major key, but the third is a little duller in color, thus it feels like moonlight rather than sunlight.
지금 계속 차이 보여주신 것처럼 원래 키, 그 드뷔시 달빛 원래 키의 D 플랫 키를 이렇게 치게 되면 가운데 있는 삼음이 흰 건반에 혼자 있게 되잖아요. 그래서 그 소리가 그냥 우리가 D 메이저 키 코드 칠 때보다 조금 더 이렇게 뮤트된 느낌이고 더 이렇게 좀 어두워서 그래서 달빛처럼 느껴지신다고.
Versus no matter what C major is a little more colorless. Of course we can influence the color, but there's a color of D major. There's going to be many more F sharps that are a little bit too loud. Those F sharps brighten everything up in verses.
D 메이저가 훨씬 밝게 느껴져요. D 플랫보다.
So I think color, as it relates to keys, is very much connected to the sensations that we have at the piano and how our fingers respond to the three-dimensional qualities of the instrument.
사실 우리가 그 손을 어떻게 미티하고 어떻게 쓰느냐 그거에 따라서 그 키에 따른 색깔의 차이가 많이 느껴지게 되는 것 같아요.
So maybe this is just coincidence. That third is already kind of muted, and that helps. So just kind of hearing the color of the key, and also to think, is this D flat major? If so, this is a B double flat. That's not very efficient compositionally. And then we get to G flat major. So of course not, but I try to think about this as in D flat major because it makes me feel like, and it's completely my perception, but it makes it feel like it's more like moonlight. And this is for me, a B double flat. Now, about color and, or as I said, if you put in your sunglasses and you remove those sunglasses, it's a wonderful feeling because you suddenly see it's maybe a little too bright, but you see color, everything's more vibrant. And I've had this experience, and I'm sure all of you have had. You see, there's a beautiful, incredible view, you take a picture of it, and you go home and you look at that picture, and maybe it's your screensaver, so every day you see that picture over and over and over.
뭐 예를 들어서 핸드폰 배경화면에 그냥 이렇게 멋진 풍경 사진 놓고 계속 질리게 보는 그런 경우를 한번 생각해 보면은.
But of course, what's missing? Color. The colors are not as vibrant when they're reproduced digitally. It's also a smaller screen. No matter what, it's not filling up your whole field of vision.
우리가 그걸 실제로 이렇게 풍경을 저 먼 나무 같은 걸 보는 거랑 달리 핸드폰으로 보면 너무 작고 컬러도 제한적이고 그냥 다 디지털화된 그런 모습으로 보게 되잖아요.
But if we see a beautiful view, don't we feel like if it's on the other side of the glass, we feel like we must open those windows? We want to go, if there's a balcony, we want to go up to the balcony to take in the same view, even though it might be clear glass and you see all the same color. But what about it, about being out there in a balcony and seeing an incredible view speaks to us because we feel the sense of time and even space. So things feel three-dimensional. You feel how far things are. You feel how high things are. It's the entire horizon.
우리가 그걸 이제 풍경을 핸드폰 화면 말고 직접 그 풍경 안에 들어가 있다고 가정을 했을 때 우리가 그게 얼마나 높은지 아니면 얼마나 깊은지 그 모든 그런 우리가 3D로 생각을 하게 되죠.
And if you put it on 3D glasses and you look at a picture on a large screen TV, still, of course, will fall short of the real thing. So, can we feel movement and can we feel time and space at the piano or, you know, as musicians? Of course, that's very subjective too, but to feel the width of something, how much space it takes, like what I was saying, something that feels like it's up in the balcony, like you're perceiving it elevated instead of down on earth.
우리가 좀 이렇게 높이서 이렇게 발코니에 정말 서서 밖에를 보는 것처럼 뭐 그런 느낌을 말씀하셨어요.
So Ravel's already done that. We don't have to really search more. It's just identifying with what Ravel has chosen. That feels very grounded. This.
낮은 건 조금 이렇게 가라앉게 느껴지죠.
So that's one of the first color changes we've had. So from this to this to this. That's really, if we feel color, probably most people would hear that as brightening. Maybe the moonlight is shining. It's there's a voice that's rising. Sorry. So if we want something to feel brighter, it's worth kind of pointing out what makes the chord bright. So then you have a brighter color in comparison to the chord that came before. And what I used to always work hard to show the beginning, like a new, the moving note. What's the new chord? But the reason why these chords repeat is you have many chances to show what's new. So it doesn't have to be the first time we hear it. It can emerge, which is a different concept of color too. So that's a something we can play with, is how to shine different lights upon the harmonies. How about this chord? So what is of course unusual about this is the melody's right there in the midst between the figurations. So there's like something about that, even maybe it gets darker, but it's also brightening at the same time. There's tension, right? It's not a soothing harmony because there's a half step.
반음만 올라가는 거기 때문에 어떻게 보면 뭐 달크해지는 것 같기도 하고 어떻게 보면 좀 밝아지는 것 같기도 하지만 어쨌든 좀 텐션이 있다는 거고 사이에.
Now if I bring out the half step when it happens, it's too much. You can't hear the melody anymore, right? But what if the half step kind of emerges after the arrival of the note? So you give the melody room, and then introduce what it is that causes this friction, that kind of pain from the half step.
그 하프 스텝 멜로디가 이제 올라가고 나서 그러고 나서 이 반주 형태 코드 있는 게 조금 뒤늦게 이렇게 출현을 하면서 이렇게 자연스럽게 섞여지는 그런 패세지.
I had an interesting experience a few weeks ago. I was at a concert and I sat next to somebody who had the exact same reaction that I did. But when we asked other people around the room, no reaction whatsoever.
최근에 뭐 재밌는 경험을 하나 하셨는데 어떤 곳에서 옆에 있는 분이랑은 정확히 똑같은 느낌을 받으셨는데 다른 사람들은 아무도 공감을 못했대요.
And that was somebody playing vibraphones, these half steps. And they were so equally balanced, and there was such a vibration to it, it caused me to cover my ears up, and the person next to me felt the same thing. We both winced.
누가 비브라폰을 연주를 했는데 저 반음 그거를 같은 세기로 계속 연주를 해서 그게 진동이 울리고 울려서 너무 힘드셨대요, 듣기가.
And when we asked other people, they had no idea what we were talking about.
다른 사람들은 아까 말했듯이 못 느끼는 거죠, 그걸.
But finding one other person that reacted the way I did validated what I was feeling, and but I found it really interesting. But it's something about the perfectly balanced and matched vibrations, where on the piano, most half steps don't quite have that kind of a sting because we have different kinds of touch based on black and white keys, but two white keys might cause more of that than. It's maybe very subtle, but you can try it yourself. Because again, when we have white keys, maybe our sound is a little bit more mellow. Again, very subtle, but you start listening to it, maybe quietly listen to it loud, and you start to kind of hear, how do you make half steps have more vibrancy so that they are a dissonance, they hurt just a little bit. Again, not a, how do you make that sound like very equally balanced? Those are the things we work at, to even the sound out, but to also really, it's not just about making it even, but experiencing that half step and trying to get the vibrations to go in the room in such a way that maybe somebody will hear this chord and feel uncomfortable. Versus maybe it's a little different, or I like. So the composer's choice of those half steps, I think, always introduces a little bit of something slightly uncomfortable.
지금 계속 반음에 대해서 말씀해 주시고 있는데 우리가 물론 칠 때 모든 걸 다 고르게 만드는 것도 중요하지만 그 반음을 그 진동이 계속 아까 말씀하신 것처럼 울리는 게 어떻게 들리는지 그리고 라벨 이 작곡가가 특정하게 이 반음을 왜 사용했는지 좀 생각해보면 좋을 것 같아요.
So that experience listening to those half steps on the vibraphone was my proof that I can physically experience intervals. It causes some kind of reaction within me.
그래서 아까 말씀하신 그 일관처럼 그 비브라폰의 그 반음이 움직였을 때 진짜로 신체적으로 우리가 그 차이를 느끼고 그게 사실 그 반음이 좀 불편한 소리였던 거예요.
And there is a science behind it, but most of the scientific tests are done with kind of sine waves and very mechanical kinds of sounds where there's no nuance, there's no real coloring of those intervals, so it's just the exact same kind of sound, computerized.
그 뭐 과학적으로 증명된 것들도 있지만 그것들은 너무 이제 기계적으로 조작된 그런 소리, 우리가 보통 음악으로 듣는 소리가 아닌 그런 걸 바탕으로 한 연구들이지 뉘앙스는 없었어요.
So I'm going to play a little bit more now and find more examples of how we can search for color. First phrase. Second phrase. Third phrase. And then we have what you could say is the fourth phrase. So it's the same basic melody, the same shape, but they go to different places and they're all colored a little differently.
다 같은 그런 베이직한 멜로디긴 하지만 조금씩 다 색깔이 다르게 작곡이 되었죠.
And we can use the same tools we talked about earlier. How to brighten or how to darken colors is the kind of touch we use on certain notes within the chord. Now, I've done this experiment before, just to kind of, so the more sensitive we get with our ears, hopefully we become more sensitive to touch and gradations of touch. And I've used this example. So I have my iPhone here. So I remove my own fingers. They're not involved. I'm using a dead weight. You hear the C's a little bit quieter? There's a little more resistance. So the regulation, that C is just a little bit stiffer than it should be. So sometimes we play it and it pops out. It's like. Big difference, and this is not my fingers. Sometimes it's like the way I hold it, the way I release the phone makes a difference. Now what's interesting is this. I drop right here on the edge of the keys. What if I do this? No sound. That's an inch. So the difference is 57 grams of weight versus, 50 grams of weight to depress the keys here. This is 57. Doesn't go down with the same dead weight. Not to mention the back of the keys, there's no sound whatsoever. So an inch here is the difference between something sounding and not if I don't involve my interpretation. My fingers trying to will the piano to sound. We get this all the time with people that don't have a lot of experience with the piano. They push and things don't sound. They're not aware of how to manage their weight. But the more time we spend, we kind of ignore all of these things in order to just control the sound. But again, this is that demonstration. No sound. So sometimes what we can do to kind of explore nuance in color is to find very subtle ways of changing how we play with the natural resistance of the piano.
지금 보여주신 것처럼 같은 그냥 핸드폰의 무게로만 건반을 움직이셨던 건데 어디다 이렇게 힘을 주는, 어디다 올리느냐에 따라 소리가 나기도 하고 안 나기도 했잖아요. 그래서 우리가 피아니스트들도 그 피아노를 칠 때 그 건반 컨트롤을 그렇게 굉장히 미묘한 차이로 할 수 있다는 거.
Now imagine the key, which goes all the way back here, was represented by my arm. This is different compared to right? It springs up a little different. There's more weight to the it's more resistance here versus there. If it was this long, you could create enormous sounds with much ease. But because of how compact and shorter it is, there's just more, this is our dynamic range is affected, of course, by weight, by speed of attack, but also this feeling of resistance in the keys.
그 키의 저항이 느껴지는 게 거리에 따라서도 되게 달라질 수 있어요.
So the difference between this, I'll do it with pedal, and you can hear the difference, with and without. I did change my touch, but I don't feel like I changed my weight. I changed the touch because I was feeling more resistance. It was a little stickier back there. Now without pedal, it's not as short because you have to work a little harder to lift from the back of the keys. So there's different kinds of color. So maybe this sounds more shimmery. This sounds more muted. The keys are suppressed and they're held down. It's just harder to lift. I can do that same thing out here, but I have to work a little harder to keep it down. With there, I can't lift high if I wanted to. I couldn't really lift very comfortably. So what's the truth? Maybe it's a little bit of everything because the moonlight shines different kinds of perspectives on these waves. Maybe clouds pass by. Sometimes it's a little more shimmery. Sometimes it's a little bit more muted.
지금 보여주신 것처럼 건반 어느 쪽에 손을 위치하냐에 따라서 그 건반이 다시 올라오는 저항의 시감과 그 무게가 다르기 때문에 소리도 되게 달라지고 뭐 계속 달빛 얘기하시는데 어떻게 보면 조금 더 빛날 때도 있고 이게 조금 더 달크할 때도 있고 여러 가지 좀 다양한 표현들이 있을 수 있어요.
I'll try to play this without influencing what's happening with my hands. I'll try to keep my weight consistent and just change the amount of friction that I feel at the keys. You can find different ways of coloring it. Maybe the whole thing starts more muted. Then it opens up. Or the other way around. So maybe sometimes you mute the sound. Where we play this, very often the right hand is here as like a block that you have to work the left hand around. Now, if that's the case, you're playing deep into the keys. This is a muted sound. So if you want it to be brighter, you have to give a little more weight, or you brush it in a place where there's less resistance on the keys. Now, if you want different colors, maybe you find these little subtleties of how you place that finger, as well as you use different kinds of hand weight and finger weight and arm weight, timing. We have so many tools. So this is, of course, not the only tool, but it's one extra tool. It's maybe the most subtle of all the tools, but it's something to think about because sometimes we try so hard to create a diminuendo without feeling like, what's the color? Is it a muting? Is it suppressing the movement and gets quieter? Or it's just lightening the touch and keeping the same shimmer? That's a different feeling of the crescendo, or diminuendo, I should say. You could do all of this and play the opening and somebody still doesn't hear the difference, right? But I guess it's like, this is part of our work as artists, to keep just researching and probing and thinking. And all the things I talked about, there's no way I could attempt to do all of that all at once when I play. I'll do the best I can from all different resources, but in the end, I will fall far short. But I guess the important thing is that we try, and we keep trying, and we have ideas and motivations. And of course, this is directly related to technique, right? But your technique serves a purpose of illuminating color, keeping something shimmering, keeping something beautiful that's beyond what words can describe.
당연히 뭐 이런 걸 잘 치기 위해서는 테크닉이 준비되어야 되고 연구를 하고 발전을 해야겠지만 결국에 그 위에 더 중요한 건 우리가 이걸 어떻게 색깔을 낼 것인가, 어떻게 빛나게 할 것인가 그런 거에 대한 생각인 것 같아요.
So I'm going to go now into the next melody, which it goes. So what makes this? It has a different nature. This water and different speeds, slower and faster. So when it's faster, you can really feel there's more light. Of course, what makes it the speed? But when you play faster, you also have to release the fingers more. You're not holding. So the speed of the release affects color. Of course, shape as well. So I start thinking about how to find more color within this phrase. Maybe these harmonies, if I want it to be more beautiful, a clear touch, but perhaps a little more kind of legato. Versus that, more release in that arpeggio. So we do this most of the time anyways without realizing it's the speed of those arpeggios. But maybe to exaggerate that feeling within our hands. Connected, release. Connected, release. Harmonically, there's more tension within that, even though it's just a whole tone. It's kind of a whole tone chord, but it comes through a half step. Now, how to find a color? So if we talk about vocal melodies, at the piano, we will always fall short of what the human voice can do, which has infinitely much more depth and range. Like if I just sing tia, we can't really do that at the piano. Tia, this gets more of a seductive quality, but we use our imagination. We use other things that we can, and I guess there's no way to really experiment with color unless you just dabble. Find that quiet, yearning sound. So these arpeggios, I try to hold more of the notes within my hand to make it feel warmer versus this. Versus the augmented chord, to highlight the color change. And with the first phrase, ninth chord, augmented chord, second phrase, and the third phrase, right? So the color differences can be exaggerated and expanded.
지금 중간중간마다 계속 나인th 코드에서 그 증화음으로 가는 게 계속 바뀌는 것처럼 컬러 체인지도 계속 발전되고 계속 커져가고 있어요.
We have. That's a really beautiful passage with it should sound like a glissando, but you have a scale to play, which makes it much more difficult. But what makes Ravel could have written just octaves, but we have. So this F will always be underplayed no matter what we try to do. It's where it falls under the hand. But just embrace it. It gives a little more warmth. It's like moonlight again. So this sounds so bright. Everybody plays it and it sounds bright, and it's because all these black keys and it just shimmers and the hands it's freer to, of course, embrace the brightness, but one can also play it more muted and just highlight. It's like the moonlight shining upon the waves, so it's not sustained brightness. It's It's little flashes here and there.
방금 치신 부분 되게 당연히 밝게 많이들 연주하고 그렇게 들리기도 하지만 또 그게 사실 조금 더 뮤트 될 수도 있고 그리고 계속 말씀하시는 그 달빛이 그 파도 물결 위에 이렇게 단단하게 비추는 모습을 표현하면 더 좋을 것 같아요.
There was one more thing I forgot to talk about. It's when we have this melody here. It comes a little bit later. When I first learned this, I decided, that's too difficult, I'm going to try it another. Redistribution of it. And you gain something, but I still don't know what is the best way because I spent too long playing it that way. But when you do it with one hand, it's more active, right? Versus it's comfortable. So the activity creates a little bit, obviously Ravel wanted that. He wanted to feel like the water was starting to swirl. It's foreshadowing the next section.
선생님이 처음에 저 패세지 연습하실 때는 여기가 손이 너무 어려우니까 왼손 오른손을 조금 나눠서 편하게 해보셨는데 그거랑 또 비교해서 왼손이 그냥 멜로디를 다 이렇게 칠 때 조금 그 물에 이런 스플래시한 그런 움직임들이 잘 느껴졌던 것 같아요.
So I started to think about it. It's uncomfortable, maybe for most people, but for me it was especially uncomfortable because I didn't live with it like that for many years. I played it a different way, and I decided I want to play it the way it's written, and I started playing other pieces that maybe had a similar kind of texture. Ravel's Jeu d'eau, where we have these kind of very pleasing, feel-good octaves to play with in the left hand. Why does this not feel good? Again, it's white key. It's like here. It's not like it's up there. It's there. It makes it awkward, but and I started to compare, and it opened up the way I heard the passage after that. I wanted to kind of channel the ending of Jeu d'eau a little bit, right? You know, the way the octaves resonate. So, yeah, back to the feeling of vocal nuance. How to make something feel seductive?
어떻게 소리를 이렇게 좀 유혹하는 듯이 만들 수 있을까요?
The feeling, this is very direct. How about a little bit? That a little bit, but a little bit of a feeling of push and pull. I'm going to show you something. No. Tease, take it away. And we can do that with, of course, dynamics, with shades, color, but a lot of that's to do with timing too, right? Very subtle sense of timing. Something goes forward, something takes a little bit more time. We can look at this from many different perspectives, but it's about three-dimensional qualities showing, kind of receding. And I started thinking about every musician next to pianists, okay? Just about every other musician faces forward when they play. So the idea for them dynamic is very much project the sound this way versus they're keeping it more to themselves. So it's three-dimensional this way, whereas us pianists, we can't really aim the sound that way. If If we do so, it's just in our imagination. But still, you want people there to hear it, but the sound, it's just an average. It goes every direction, that way, this way. But you want people to perceive of three-dimensionality, right? So voicing could be a feeling, not that you're bringing things out, but you want foreground, background, right? We all know this, but this is just a different way of thinking about it, because what's important is for people there to feel it, not to be felt here. So can you send a melody that way and pull it back? Can you bring something out through the texture so that more people are hearing it 20 feet, 50 feet away?
피아니스트를 제외한 이제 다른 음악가들을 보면 다 앞에 보고 연주하면서 소리가 이렇게 이쪽으로 나아가잖아요. 근데 그것처럼 피아니스트들도 물론 우리는 앞을 보고 이쪽을 보고 있지만 이쪽으로 더 텍스처를 어떻게 느껴지게 할 수 있을지, 어떻게 더 중요한 것과 백그라운드가 되는 것을 입체적으로 만들 수 있을지 생각해보면 좋을 것 같아요.
I'll talk about a few more phrases before I play through the piece. Later on, we have this phrase, C sharp major in the left hand, and then E minor. And then it goes to kind of like a jazzy chord. It's also, we could analyze it as a 5/13 chord, but it's really a suspension, quadriturn. Now, how to give that phrase more of the seductive quality? Again, Ravel already made those choices for us. Major, minor, then. But the more we can really hear that major, minor, while we're jumping around and playing these chords with double thirds, that we have so many other things to think about. But to go back to the underlying harmony, not to only hear those chords, but what they represent and how the crescendo, half of it is created through the harmonies versus this. So, no change of harmony. Second phrase. That's from, it's a tritone relationship. We also have that in the first phrase, but there's a middle bass note. So what's the feeling of that, of those harmonies? You can explore it playing like what I did. Two hands. Minor. And then, sorry. This is such a soothing harmony. Same notes, it's just up a minor third, but it feels different under the hands again. All white keys. So, right, it resonates differently. So, I don't think we have to arbitrarily look for more things in what's written in the music, but just to see it for what it is, right? For me to go back to what I was saying earlier on, that I'm partially colorblind, it's like, hey, it's all there. Try to see in color and see it with more vibrancy. And, it gives you a goal besides just worrying about the double thirds. And also, there's a half step. That half step versus larger intervals. Half step. That half step is a little reluctance. There's, again, the seduction doesn't open up until there. Okay. Now, one more spot, the climax, which is one of the most fantastic climaxes one can find. Very complicated rhythms between the left hand and right hand, not moving at the same speed, right? It's like water swirling around. Now, most of if you just simply play all the right notes, clear sound, and you play it with the energy, Ravel already wrote in this incredible flourish. But what more can we do to find color within? So is that. Now if I just play it this way, different kind of color, black key, C sharp, the A is a little more modest sounding. And this, very dark. So we try to find the darkness. If I underplay that note, not as much color as this is such a beautiful chord. It has a little pain in it too because of the half step relationship. So this is maybe more painful than that compared to this, compared to that. It's to do with the overtone series and how sound waves vibrate. But still, a dissonance is a dissonance. To really hear that, like these two fingers, hear them connect to one another and feel like we are disagreeing. We don't find the same center. Again, how about this? Now we have a different bass note. Right? Different context. Okay, and then we have there's these beautiful glissandi. And how to find more color within the glissando? Just a glissando by itself is already such a beautiful thing. It's nice when you have a chance to play it beautifully. Much of the time when you play glissandi in music, it's kind of fast, let it rip, really brilliant. So here are two examples of beautiful glissandi. Not easy to play, not easy to control, but it's so satisfying for me. That's my perception of it. We have a white key gliss, and I glissed it like this for a long time. When I studied with Menachem Presser, he suggested you try to find a gliss that is a legato without even pedal, and I couldn't do it at first, but it started to become an obsession of mine, and the idea of you gliss with multiple fingers, and there's overlap compared to this is just one little surface at a time, but if you use multiple fingers, it can be very beautiful. And it's a combination of nail and a little bit of knuckle, but it doesn't hurt because it's pianissimo and also because you use so much surface area. If one finger sticks out, it's really going to hurt. So if they're all right there, it's just the idea of like, I wanted to do this all day, and just kind of this back and forth. And then also to explore a glissando like what I was saying earlier on, a little more muted. You let it rip this way, or you mute it, going in. Very different. Of course, I'm phrasing that too. It's not just the resistance of the keys, but it's, again, more color choices that we can kind of choose from. All right. There's at the near the very end, there is this haunting melody, very quiet. I played it always kind of the same way, and I was looking for more interesting or unique ways of expressing it, or better yet, how to find a freshness within. And I talked about this in my talk last year. Sometimes a slight change of fingering that you only allow yourself to feel in performance gives a special kind of sensation. If I'm always playing 4/5, no matter what I do, I start fabricating other things. But what if I try something like 4/3? I reach over, or some kind of substitution. I try it once and I like it, and I decide I'm going to put on sunglasses for the next couple of days and only try that finger for the first time in front of people because I want it to feel fresh. That's a little risky, right? But obviously, if you do this all the time and you experiment, withholding a fingering until that moment is the most incredible thing. I decided I actually like it better with my left hand because it's just something about going more to the. I feel like I reach a little higher. It makes it feel like my tessitura is lower and I reach up, instead of my tessitura is up here and I reach down. I just come back to the home. So everybody understand what I mean by tessitura? Like where does the voice sit?
음역 때 뭐 이렇게 좀 다른 거 얘기하시는 것 같아요. 그리고 그 이제 거의 끝나갈 때쯤에 나오는 그 멜로디 방금 보여주신 것처럼 이제 너무 익숙하면은 그 지루해지고 그 새로움이 없잖아요. 그럴 때 왼손으로 해본다든지 핑거링을 무대에서 한번 바꿔본다든지 그런 시도도 조금 선생님한테는 새롭게 보는데 도움이 됐다고 말씀하셨어요.
So I'm going to play through Ondine now, and I will personally feel, like I'm taking some risks, trying some different ways of thinking about sound and color and maybe in physical approach, slight modifications. But I have the luxury of having lived with this piece for a long time, so I feel like I can do that. But I wish I had done this from the beginning, because it would have been a very different kind of experience if my first preoccupation from the first half year was not to control everything, but to find more color, to unlock the richness of the possibilities within the music. I guess I can turn this off.
It's on, it's good.
Okay. to say that I forgot, but I think it's worth for me mentioning. When I was kind of playing around with this opening, and I started to kind of mess also with the piece that I don't have in my repertoire, but I taught it by Liszt, the Waldus Rauschen, the first concert etude, which has a similar. So it's what we're hearing in a flat major. It's the question mark, right? It's a dominant 7. But also, Liszt marked something in his music, pedal vibrato, right? And I started to kind of play with how that affects color, and I forgot to do it when I just played it. But we can floor the pedal, or we can vibrate. And you can maybe floor it, maybe vibrate the pedal a little bit. And it does really change the perception of light and like how much resonance there is. Not ever a clear change, but just the feeling like the foot is responding to the music the way, or hopefully our emotions do, or even what we do with phrasing. But thank you very much. Anybody have any questions about anything? Sorry?
Thank the translator.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I was thinking I could do one better with like different keys. I was thinking of the well-tempered clavier where he has an E flat minor and an E sharp major.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question. You know the section following the C major glissando, the next section. Do you have any tips for that? I think that's very difficult.
You mean this? Yeah, it's tricky because it's like it has to be so quiet, but the figurations I find noisy. It's the same idea. So many black keys. You have to keep those quiet because that's what's so colorful. So I find that it's more successful for me if I really just kind of lay off of that and try to feel the color within the chord. I don't know if that helps, but it's just rather than control everything, bring something out and then let the other things kind of fall to the side. Christian.
When you're maybe overwhelmed with a lot of obligations, how do you find the time to incorporate all of these things into your practice? I feel like a lot of your methods are very unconventional, which is what makes them appealing to a lot of us, in a way that we don't really think about these things the same way that you do, which is obviously why this lecture is fascinating and fantastic. So if you have any tips on how do you go about your practice navigating these more unconventional methods of practicing as opposed to like the methods that we typically engage in a normal practice session?
Yeah, I think I also approach this piece having spent time with it already and thinking of other ways of looking at it. But as I said, I wish I had done this from the beginning. But I have worked certain newer pieces with this kind of thing in mind where my main preoccupation, and it really takes a lot of discipline to do this, and I know I'm partially a hypocrite, but working in the beginning and not just thinking about control, but thinking about color. Primarily about color. How can I get it to be shimmery, a little more voice this way, just listen to the quality of the sounds. So drilling something for like 5 minutes, that's all it takes. In those 5 minutes, you're just exploring color, right? We all spend time drilling. So if the drilling is less mindless and really exploration of sound based upon what you want to point out within the score, sometimes that gives you some technical solutions you might not have initially thought about. And then it's worth repeating because you're then repeating something that feels good and it gets at the essence of what you're searching for. Make sense? Yes?
How can you apply this to other composers, like a little further back from Ravel, like Chopin?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing as like, let's say you play something that's so beautiful, you think, what makes this beautiful? What about this key is beautiful? And you embrace that particular key, the way it feels. Maybe play other music in that key to kind of waken up our sensitivity. Play stuff in other keys, and then you experience that key fresh. It's like what I said, put on sunglasses and remove them, right? So, or play that same music in different keys, and you go back to the primary key, and it has a new light to it. So it's, in a sense, it might seem unconventional, but in some ways we're just kind of looking at finding ways to more, to refresh our sensibilities to music that we spend so much time playing, that we become desensitized to that. So how can we resensitize ourselves? You know, it's one more analogy. It's like wine tasting. You know, some people are fantastic and they have such a palette of color at their disposal. For me, I can't really tell wine from yesterday from this. I'm very susceptible to what people tell me. This is an amazing wine. I'm like, oh yeah, I taste it. and this is worth $80. Oh yeah, I know. But in truth, by myself, I don't have that refined of a taste palette for wine. I don't really remember. But you can train that, right? But even if you go to a wine tasting, what do they do between wines? You have a little bit of bread. Something to neutralize it so it can feel fresh again. Otherwise, you're comparing from taste to taste instead of having something bland, right? So sometimes, like, you don't know what more to do, play it in a different key. And then you come back to the key, and it feels a little bit, you're a little more sensitive to what it has to offer. All right, so I think that's a wrap. Thank you very much, everybody.